Recently we've had some new members in our Warframe clan, and a bit of a discussion was going on about Saryn. People were wondering how they should build her, and the conversation actually moved on into Discord as well. And of course people did ask me what my Saryn build is, and I tried to explain it, but honestly it's kind of hard to do that in text, so I thought I would just make a quick video telling you how I generally build my Saryn Warframe. As you can see, I've got Saryn Prime, but it's essentially the same concept for Saryn. Saryn Prime's just a little better off. If for some reason you don't know this game or you don't know Saryn, Saryn is the queen of toxicity. She is the poison princess. She uses virus and toxin to slay her enemies. Now, there are no right ways to play Warframe. You can play Warframe a variety of different play styles, and you can use a lot of different builds. There's almost no build that is wrong, although, you know, some of them definitely work against what that frame is best utilized for. Saryn is a frame that has 4 very, very useful abilities. They all work well together. However, I can say Spores is the way I generally like to play. I focus on this first ability, and I can tell you that's, I'd say, generally accepted as the best way to build her. I'm using air quotes. Again, a lot of different players will use different builds and will swear by them. It's very much a personal choice. Basically, I start by casting Spores on 1 or 2 enemies, and then I hit those enemies with a gas-based weapon which will explode the spores and spread them to everyone else. I do this until the spores have pretty much spread to everybody in the map, and then occasionally I might hit miasma, or I'll just keep bombarding them with the gas weapon for damage. If you are new to Saryn, one trick to use is to cast Molt, which is where you shed your skin and then cast spores on Molt. You can then hit the Molt with a gas weapon, or recast Molt so it explodes, and the spores will be detonated and it will go to any enemies within range. And if you set range quite far, you will actually uncover enemies you've not even seen yet. And because I do like to go in melee range and hit things, I keep Toxic Lash on pretty much all the time. So as you can see, I will use all 4 abilities for this frame. For my mods, I do tend to focus on range and duration. Strength is useful, but being able to spread your spores further and for longer overall I find does a lot more damage. So I use mods such as Overextend, which increase the range, Stretch, and Cunning Drift for a total of 250%. Now, Cunning Drift might be a little tough to get early on. I can't remember Overextend. I think that's a nightmare mod. I really would get some help if I were you and get that mod. Range, 90% range, that is a huge deal. You're going to want this if you want a spore build. It does come with a minus 60% to strength, and you are going to want to compensate for that. I use Transient Fortitude and Intensify, which bring my strength back up to 125%. Now, that drops duration, so I need at least 1 duration mod. Primed Continuity is what I'm using. If you don't have the primed version, Continuity should do, but you might want to also add Constitution to get a little more duration as well. Duration is pretty important for Saryn. If you do have primed continuity and you think 156% duration's a little over the top, you could replace that with, say, primed flow for a bigger energy pool. Or if you want, perhaps even something like Augur Reach, if you've got this one, for an amazing 280% range. I also use Vitality to increase my health pool to 925 and Regenerative Malt to regenerate that health when needed. It's always good to be able to stay on your feet. You're not doing damage if you lay on your back waiting to be revived. For the aura mod, I'm usually running corrosive projection, but that's because I normally build towards the higher end content for the enemies that are the toughest and armoured. This, however, is not essential if you're playing most of the missions, and because corrosive projection is a dash polarity, and I believe Saryn comes with a D polarity, you're not going to be able to run this aura without using a former to change the polarity. I do that on most of my frames. If you decide you want to keep running Saryn, you might want to think about that, especially if you're running sorties and that sort of thing. Again, it's not essential. In the meantime, the aura mod I think I would recommend is probably rejuvenation. For your weapons, you're going to want at least one weapon that will spread the spores. You're going to want one gas-based weapon. In fact, you might want two. I actually generally only run one weapon, and that's the secondary, the Zacti. However, if you want to run a primary, you've got Mutilus Cernus, which is a really good option. You've even got things like the Igni Wraith. If you modify that for gas, it will be very, very effective. And on the secondaries, you also have options. There are plenty of them. A lot of people swear by the Pox. I just like the Zacti. I think this is one of those weapons you should try and get hold of and try. You should try all of the weapons and see what works for you. I modify my Zacti heavily for gas, things like pathogen rounds and pistol pestilence. I did used to run corrosive with gas, and that did work, but honestly, even against armoured opponents, I found maximising the gas to be the best way to go. It's a high status weapon, you can shoot at their feet, you can shoot at them, and if you use something like Fulmination, you will get a massive explosion that will really help spread those spores. For melee, I'm currently running a Zor. It's a polearm, and I really do enjoy this polearm. It's an infested polearm, but if I were to recommend any weapon for new Saryn players, it would be the Legion. In fact, the Legion is just a weapon I would recommend for everyone. It's an utter monster. Not only does it have very good stats, it does a lot of slash damage, which at the moment is pretty damned good. It also comes with a great mechanic whereby anytime it procs a status effect, whether it be slash, blast, whatever, it will give you a guaranteed toxin proc as well, and that toxin proc will merge with any free elementals like electricity. So in my current setup, I've got a 96% chance of getting either something like a slash or a blast proc, and then getting a free corrosive proc. Added to the fact that I'm using condition overload, this weapon is a monster. It will annihilate most things in the game. One other option for Saryn, and this is one of my favourite mixes, but only on places like the Plains, is the Glaive Prime. I've got this spec'd with power throw. I do a lot of explosion and quick return so that I can just throw it and have it return. This thing is also a monster, and of course it's really nice that you can dual wield both the Zacti and the Glaive. Bouncing around the plains with this setup was a lot of fun. I have to say, probably not as effective as the Legion, even though it's more fun. It does require a bit of skill, it does require timing, and it does require a little care so you don't blow yourself up. I wouldn't recommend this on a closed map. It can be kind of dangerous. I have run it a few times, but it does require a bit of focus. For my companion, I'm actually using the Taxon and the Artax for a guaranteed cold proc. I actually prefer the Helios, but the Taxon has a bit more range. If you want to run a Kubro, you can, but I like vacuum. I'm too lazy to run around and pick up all the loot. So that's it. That is my Saryn build. That's how I like to run with her. It is not the only build that works, obviously. As I keep saying, a lot of this comes down to personal preference. This is what works for me, but I ran her an awful lot. I still run her quite a lot. I did loads of sorties with her. In fact, I would probably say I did over half of the sorties I've ever done with this frame. She is powerful, she's versatile, and in my opinion, a lot of fun. I also think she looks pretty incredible, at least the Prime version does. The normal version not so much, but you know, you're going to be heading for the Prime. If you like Saryn, you're definitely going to want to farm the Saryn Prime part. Great frame, and I hope this video gave you some idea how I like to set her up.